At the end of FP2, it was Max Verstappen sitting on top of the speed charts, besting the two Mercedes of Bottas and Hamilton. But more surprising was Daniel Ricciardo and his Renault team finishing in the top 3 and looking like they had the pace. That was up until a hydraulic issue caused Ricciardo to have to pull over his car and get out in the middle of FP2. Hopefully not an issue for tomorrow. Also up top was Alex Albon finishing 4th at the end of FP2. If he can carry that over to qualification tomorrow, it'll take a lot of pressure off. Bringing up the rear once again was Haas, who looked nowhere near like they were on the pace and did not look ready for this Grand Prix once again. But let's take a look at every single team and what they need to do to be successful at Spa this year.
2020 Belgian Gran Prix coming up on Sunday. We are just a few hours away from FP3 and qualification. Wanted to go through a chart of every single team, the 2 drivers for those teams, and what they would consider a successful weekend and what they would consider a fantastic weekend. Keys to the Spa 2020 Grand Prix, what I think each driver and each team needs to do. Let's start up top with Red Bull Racing. They were the story today in FP2. Max Verstappen, top of the speed charts. And of course, Alex Albon coming in 4th. So having a pretty good day for him and a pretty good practice. So my key to the overall team, that will be in the middle of each of these points. Both drivers on top, both in qualification and on Sunday's Grand Prix, would be the overall team goal for Red Bull. That's the same every week, but I think this week they have the footprints there with Albon having good practices to actually maybe do it. Max Verstappen, his dream scenario, win the Grand Prix on Sunday. He looked like he had the speed today. We'll see if that carries over to FP3 and qualification later on today if you're in the UK, or tomorrow here in the US. But a solid weekend for him would be getting his 6th straight podium, which would match his all-time record of podiums. Alex Albon, ultimate day for him would be if he can figure out a way to podium on Sunday. But for me, the more important thing for Red Bull Racing is let's qualify well this weekend and not be playing catch-up during the Grand Prix. That's the focus of Red Bull on Alex Albon. And I think if he can get a good top 5 qualification later on, in quali later, Albon will come out of this weekend pretty happy with some of the pressure off of him. For Ferrari, different story. For Leclerc, we got top 5 would be an awesome weekend for him. I think that's out of the question, but we're talking about dream scenarios, right? For him, just making Q3 for Ferrari, and especially for Charles Leclerc right now, would be huge. They looked terrible in practice today, so I don't know if that's going to be possible, but it's still Ferrari. So my expectations for them are that's what his goal should be. For Sebastian Vettel, just finish in the top 10, because Vettel has not looked as good as Charles Leclerc. And making Q3, I think, is something they would just settle for at this point. Speeds today in FP1, FP2, they're not going to make Q3 based on those speeds, so we'll see what happens a little bit later. Overall, team strategy. So that's been the story with Ferrari all year long. Does the strategy favor one driver over the other? So let's have some good, consistent strategy this weekend through qualification and especially during the Grand Prix. AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly. For me, he's having a great year, so my expectations, I think, would be a fantastic Grand Prix for him would be to finish P6 or better. If he does that, I think he's going to come out of this ecstatic. A solid weekend for Pierre Gasly, finishing in the top 10. David Kvyat, I'm going to say P8 or better would be a dream weekend for him, and top 10 would be an okay weekend. He is definitely under pressure right now. He is underperforming at AlphaTauri. There is already some of the rumors this weekend coming out that the Red Bull organization could drop him if those type of results continue. And Pierre Gasly is just outshining him. And it's kind of a very weird scenario here where Pierre Gasly is playing the Verstappen role at this team right now to what Verstappen did to him a year ago. And right now, I think that, you have one driver here who definitely needs to have a solid, good weekend and make sure that he doesn't have any driver mistakes and gives the best performance he can have. AlphaTauri, Kimi Raikkonen. For me, the dream weekend for Kimi would finish in the points. P10 or better would be an awesome weekend for him and Alfa Romeo. A solid weekend for him, make Q2. I think they're close based on their speeds today. I don't know that they will get there, but they should be able to make Q2. And maybe if some things happen during this Grand Prix, Kimi can get his first points of the year. Giovinazzi, again, same thing. This team's kind of in a similar situation. Giovinazzi's been having great starts to his Grand Prix this season. Be nice to see if he could finish in the points. I think that'd be the dream scenario for Alfa Romeo. and just making Q2, I think they would consider that a really successful weekend. And overall, I just wrote in the middle here, this team needs points. Giovinazzi's the only one with points this season. Get them in the points. That would be a great weekend. Racing Point, Sergio Perez. Perez looked fast. And again, Racing Point looked fast, but especially Perez this weekend. So for me, reach the podium. I think that would be the dream scenario for Sergio Perez this weekend. He's got a car that can be in the conversation there. And if a couple things happen, a couple drivers get together, or the strategies play out in the right way, I think that Sergio Perez could podium this weekend. Just a solid weekend for him would be to qualify P4 or better. And I didn't write it on the board, but finishing a top 5 would be a solid weekend for him. But I'd really love to see him podium. Lance Stroll didn't look as fast in practice today, so we'll see what happens there. For me, he's still part of Racing Point, and these cars look fast. So a top 5 would be a really good weekend for Lance Stroll, the dream scenario. And the okay weekend for him is Q3, making Q3 and a top 7 finish. I think they would be happy coming away with that. Overall, for this one, I couldn't fit it in the middle. Race pace. They've looked fast in practices before and qualification before, but there have been races this season where it didn't carry over to Sunday. So that's what I'll be looking for at Spa. Does Racing Point's fast pace carry over to the actual Grand Prix? Back up to the top. At the top of Formula One, we have Mercedes, of course. Valtteri Bottas, his dream scenario, win the Grand Prix. You race for Mercedes. Valtteri wants to turn some of his bad luck and unfortunate Grand Prix in the past year around and get back to that first Grand Prix of the year where he finished on top. An okay weekend for him will be if he podiums. No more tire failures that have him back in 11th and 12th place or finishing out of the podium. Bottas, that'd be an okay weekend for him if he podiums. Lewis Hamilton, his dream scenario would be to win, and his okay weekend would be if he wins. When you're at the top, anything less than being on top is not a great weekend. So for me, Hamilton has to win. Anything less than that, he's not going to be happy, and the team's not going to be happy. And overall, for Mercedes, finish 1-2. Knock out Red Bull out of the conversation there. Don't let Racing Point sneak in. Lock down number 1, number 2, and walk away with the podium. Whether it's Bottas winning or Hamilton winning, they don't care if they get the top 2 spots. That's a good weekend for Mercedes. McLaren, Carlos Sainz Jr. P6 or better, I think, is his dream weekend. I think that'd be a really great weekend for him and his McLaren. It looked kind of around that 8th to 9th fastest pace so far in practice. So that would be some improvement over the next 2 days. I think that'd be really great. P8 or better, I think, is an overall good weekend for him. And Lando Norris, P5, I think, or better, is a dream weekend for him and McLaren right now. He was about 7th after FP2. So I think it's within range and maybe attainable. But maybe, it's still a strong goal. P7 or better, I think, is his okay, we're really happy with this weekend. Overall, for a team, win the midfield. That's where McLaren's at right now. They can be at the top of that midfield. They can be ahead of the AlphaTauris and way ahead of, Haas, Alfa Romeo. But, they can be close to knocking out Renault, which is probably their biggest competition, and maybe scratching at the door of Racing Point. So win the midfield. That's their goal for this weekend. Renault, Esteban Ocon, to me, has not had the best of seasons so far. So I'd like to see him kind of bump that up a little bit this weekend. A great weekend for him is P7 or better. And a solid weekend for him is just qualify well. So we've seen Daniel Ricciardo have a lot of really good qualifications. He looks fast again this weekend, and Esteban Ocon hasn't been duplicating those performances in equal equipment. So I'd like to see him qualify well. I'll take that as a pretty good weekend. And a strong P7 or better finish is what you want to see from Esteban. Daniel Ricciardo. The story of the day, as I said in my intro, super fast speed. We don't know how much that hydraulic issue he had there is going to affect him at FP3 in qualification or the Grand Prix. Solid weekend for him. He showed the speed in practice that he might be able to podium. That would be the dream scenario, so I have it up there. Hopefully, maybe we can see Ricciardo podium this weekend. Solid weekend for him would be qualify top 3 and finish in a top 5. I mean, with the speed he showed and the momentum he's been building with Renault, that would be a fantastic weekend for him, and we hope that's what happens. Overall, for our team, strong finish. Renault's had a lot of good practices and qualifying efforts, but we've seen a lot of issues with Renault during the races, whether it be mechanical failures or getting caught up in other people's messes. It just seems like not Ocon or Ricciardo can ever both have a strong, solid day that they can hang their head high on. And it seems like the team's always worried about one or the other having an issue. So good, strong finish for both cars would be a great weekend. Williams, this will be their first Grand Prix after the big news, obviously. So that'll be a really solid story to follow all weekend long. George Russell making it to Q2, I think would be a fantastic weekend for him again. They're kind of on the cusp of it again, and then maybe a little bit off of it based on their FP1 and FP2 times. Excuse me. And I think finishing P12 or better is also a dream scenario for him. Solid weekend, finish P15 or better. Nicholas Latifi, Q2, again, it would be the dream scenario. Get into that Q2 and have a good solid finish. And I think for him, a solid weekend is P15 or better. It's just where Williams are right now. And overall, what I wrote for them here is finish ahead of Haas and Alfa Romeo. That's kind of where Williams at. They have a chance of beating those teams. If they can finish ahead of those 4 cars, they've had a solid weekend as a team. But it'll be a challenge, but maybe not a challenge to beat Haas. So once again, we got Haas really looking bad through FP1 and FP2. I mentioned that in my opening. They're bringing up the bottom of the speed charts again. So what do we have for Haas? We have Kevin Magnussen, a successful weekend, is making Q2 and finishing P14 or better. They're just slow, and they don't look good again. So that, for me, is a successful weekend for Kevin Magnussen. If they do anything better in that, I think it's almost a miracle at this point. Romain Grosjean finished Q2, P16 or better. Grosjean has had a horrible year, in my opinion, and he looked really bad 2 weeks ago. So P16 or better, if he beats a couple drivers here, I think it's a success at this point. Overall for the team, I wrote, have a clean race. They haven't had a clean race, have they, this year? I can't think of one off the top of my head. You've got Grosjean, who's had all kind of issues with drivers talking about defensive driving with him and being upset with his tactics that way, and him sliding all over the racetrack. Kevin Magnussen's had retirements, some crashes, mix-ups with Alex Albon in past races. Clean race where Haas can go, qualify, race, bring both their cars home, and work on the next race after that. A nice quiet weekend if I'm Haas. Otherwise, I think someone's going to really need to have some sessions with Günther Steiner for his sanity. So that's kind of where I'm at with all these teams. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe, and I will do at least 1 or 2 more videos this weekend. Enjoy the awesome Spa 2020 Grand Prix in Belgium. Thank you for watching.